This is Newsmax TV. I'm Ashley Martella, along with Dick Morris, who joins us by phone. Hello, Dick.
Hey, Ashley. How are you doing?
Fine, thank you. There are reports of a possible mutiny by House Democrats in Nancy Pelosi's effort to become minority leader. At least 15 Democrats have said they've lost faith in her ability to lead. She's being opposed by blue dogs and even a couple of liberals. Does she survive this, Dick?
Yeah, she does, as long as she wants to. She took the precaution of making sure that all of the people that would oppose her lost re-election, so that the only Democrats who are left in the House, except for a handful of moderates, are extreme, way-out left-wing liberals who see nothing wrong in Nancy Pelosi.
House Republican Whip Eric Cantor says Democrats aren't hearing the message of voters if they keep Pelosi in a leadership role. Is he right about that?
Oh, he absolutely is. I mean, Nancy Pelosi practically grew horns during this election. She was so correctly vilified by the voters. And when you look at Obama saying that it was the economy that cost him control of the House, not his misguided policies, and certainly nothing related to health care, and you look at Pelosi, who even put out before Election Day that she might not run if she kept the majority as a way of trying to defuse Republican rhetoric, you look at her insisting on staying there long after she should be gone, it's pretty clear that they not only don't get the message, they refuse to listen.
We understand there are still some undecided House races. Any significant ones?
Well, there's one great one in California that I'm hoping David Harmer wins against Jerry McInerney. The interesting thing about California is it is so gerrymandered by the Democratic legislature that with 54 members of Congress, not a single one changed hands by party, while the rest of the country was going through convulsions. And this seat in Stockton, California, there's 0.1% of the vote separating the two of them, so I hope Harmer wins it. But in any case, this certainly is an object lesson in the vile political system that the Democrats have installed in California.
Political reports that voters 65 and older swung the hardest towards Republican candidates in this election. What do you think happened there?
Well, it's true. Not only did they give Democrats over a 20-point margin, as opposed to the 8-point margin they gave John McCain in 2008, but they also increased their voter turnout. They cast 23% of the vote in the midterm elections. Now, normally, elderly demographics put the senior citizen population of the U.S. at about 15% of the population. So you can see how disproportionately large their vote was.
There are 23 Senate seats held by Democrats that are up for re-election in 2012. Which do you see as the most vulnerable?
Well, there are a lot that are vulnerable. I think I counted 13 that I think we could take away. The most vulnerable is probably Ben Nelson from Nebraska, who probably will be DOA because of his vote on health care, just like Blanche Lincoln was this year. But you have many, many seats we could take. Sherrod Brown, the senator from Ohio, Debbie Stabenow from Michigan, Herbert Cole from Wisconsin. These are all states that went Republican this year. We've got a very good shot against Webb in Virginia. There are a whole series of senators there who represent states that went Republican, and I think we have an excellent shot at defeating them.
Bill Nelson, Florida?
Yes, I'm sorry, I meant to include him as well, sure. And of course in the House, we'll have a very good chance of expanding the number of seats, because these are going to be conducted under the newly reapportioned lines that are drawn by a large number of Republican governors and Republican legislatures. In fact, there was a study that somebody did, and they found that for 190 of the House seats, Republican governors and Republican legislators unilaterally control the drawing of those lines, whereas the Democrat number is only 70 or 80. And in terms of what we spoke about earlier, about California, the voters of California wisely decided to vest reapportionment in an impartial, nonpartisan commission. So we can expect fairer lines there, and that will put a whole lot of California seats into play.
All right, Dick, turning to a couple of financial matters. Germany is the latest to bash the Fed's $600 billion bond buying plan aimed at boosting the economy. Was the Fed's move ill-advised?
Well, I think it was not only, I think it was ill-advised. I think it's going to backfire, and I don't think it's going to front fire. I don't think it's going to work. The Fed has already increased the money supply in the United States from $900 billion to $2.1 trillion, and it has done nothing to stimulate the economy. Banks are sitting on over $800 billion of cash, and consumers have used $300 billion of those new dollars to reduce their indebtedness over the last 2 years. So consumers are paying down their credit card debts. Companies are sitting on their cash rather than invest it. And nobody's investing and nobody's spending. And the reason is there's a fundamental terror about the future of the economy, about the tax increases that loom, about cap and trade being imposed, about Obamacare tying up the whole healthcare industry, about financial regulation denying any flexibility to the banks for lending, and the federal deficit crowding everybody out of needed financing. So when you combine all of those things, simply printing more money is giving people more rope. It's more slack. But they're not taking up the slack. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And all the Fed's doing is pouring in more water. The danger, of course, is that once the economy begins to emerge from this, and once we begin to come out of this recession and this man-made depression that we're in because of Obama, then everybody is going to start spending money all at once. It's as if he filled every car in a parking garage filled with gas, but nobody's driving now because the weather's bad. But when the weather turns good, they're all going to take their cars out, and we'll have a humongous traffic jam, which means gigantic inflation.
Interest rates are already near zero in the U.S. If the Fed's move is designed to provide more incentive for home buyers, are there even buyers lining up? And do we risk creating another housing bubble?
Well, we're way, way, way away from a bubble. In fact, the recommendation of the Deficit Reduction Commission that Obama set up, which echoes recommendations that Obama himself has made to Congress, would be to slash the mortgage deduction for interest rates paid on your home mortgage, either to eliminate it or to cut it back to 28%, which would mean effectively losing a third of it. And those changes would be the exact opposite of the goal of the Fed. So they're stepping on the brake pedal and the gas pedal at the same time.
All right, now bond king Bill Gross says the Fed's plan could lead to a debasement of the dollar. Is a weaker dollar policy the right signal to be sending?
Well, it will in the short term lead to a weakening of the dollar, and that's part of an effort to try to hype American exports. The problem is you get in a race to zero with all the other countries because they're not going to sit by and let the Fed weaken the dollar while their currencies remain strong and their exports are no longer competitive and U.S. imports to their country undermine it. It's the old dynamic of a trade war. Increasing tariffs sounds great until you realize the other guy's going to raise his tariffs too, and that's going to hurt your industry more than it'll help it. And instead of a trade war, which is prohibited by the World Trade Organization, we're now in a currency inflation war, and with just as dire consequences.
Okay, speaking of inflation, Fed Chairman Ben Bernanke says higher prices are not a threat. Sarah Palin this week in a speech said food prices are already higher. Who's right?
I think that I think inflation is a serious threat when you've tripled the size of the currency and you're about to quadruple and quintuple it. Bernanke's right that it's not going to happen tomorrow or next month because the economy's half dead. But once we begin to recover, the Fed is going to have so much money out there to soak up that it won't be able to, and too much money will be chasing too few goods, and you will have huge inflation akin to that which we would have suffered at the end of World War I, and which we did suffer after World War I and World War II when suddenly price controls came off.
All right, Dick Morris, as always, thanks a lot. We'll talk to you again real soon.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching Newsmax TV.